Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
Today's sponsor is Audible. They're the leading provider of spoken audio and entertainment. Listen to an audiobook wherever and whenever you want. I do. For more information, to get your free trial, go to audiblepodcast.com/Lutz, audiblepodcast.com/LUTZ. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz on 1590 WPSL. You know me, I'm a fourth-generation entrepreneur. I firmly believe that if you want to succeed and you want to thrive and survive in the new economy, you've got to become an entrepreneur, and quickly. And with me is Carl Schramm. He's a best-selling author, economist, and entrepreneur, co-author of Better Capitalism, Renewing the Entrepreneurial Strength of the American Economy. Carl, welcome to the Financial Survival Network.
Thank you for having me.
Entrepreneurialism, what is it exactly, if you had to define it?
Well, it's the business of creating a new business, essentially. And when it boils down to it, there are really just a few ingredients. One is a new business is essentially the creation of something out of an idea. It's kind of a magical event. Second, you have to have something that's innovative. Third, you have to have the ambition to grow it. And fourth, you have to have the management skills to pull an idea into a growing, sizable business.
Right. And you've done this a number of times, right?
I have. I'm in the middle of it right now. Mm-hmm.
And you've done it, I think I read 5-6 times. What was the best one you ever did?
I think probably the best one I ever did was the one that became a platform for creating others. I had a company called Green Spring Advisors before I went to work at the Kauffman Foundation. And for 6 years, we advised big firms like Johnson & Johnson and Ford about what to acquire by way of small firms and to look inside and, in fact, invent firms inside their companies. And at the same time was in the business of inventing some businesses for other clients and for myself. So it was an invention machine, if you will, or an entrepreneurial machine. I think that's the one I had the most fun at. But the reality is you should always say, which I could say too, I'm having the most fun at the one I'm doing right now. So fun is part of the game, I think.
Yeah, I think when you ask people why they start a business, the money comes way down on the list. So there's other things that are more important than money to you, which is why you take the risk. You risk your capital, you risk your time. You sacrifice a lot to start your own business. And that's always something I found interesting. Yes, we all want to make money, a lot of it, but we start businesses for wholly different reasons.
Exactly. I think it's much like, I guess, big game hunting. I've never been on a big game hunt. But, you know, you have a fantasy that when it's all over, you know, hanging over your fireplace in Tennessee is, you know, the head of an elephant or whatever you're hunting. But not everybody who goes on that journey brings one home, but they would all go again. Because it turns out that the journey was at least as much fun. And if you get rich, that's terrific.
Mm-hmm.
But along the way, you'll be rich in experience, friends. You'll have dimensions of, you know, disappointment that you didn't know was part of the world. You'll also have moments of high that will be exuberating. So it's the journey. And, of course, I would never recommend anybody do it except to create a firm that's going to be sizable. And, in fact, to make you money.
Right. So the challenge is the feeling of accomplishment. You know, Carl, the whole concept of self-esteem is one which is twisted by the society. From when you're very young, they teach you to feel good about yourself in school, but they don't teach you how to feel good about yourself, which is accomplishment, overcoming adversity, achieving goals, and succeeding. And entrepreneurship teaches you all those things.
Yeah, self-esteem, I think, is largely, when it counts, it's earned. And my own view about this is probably quite contrary to the notion now that Little League and whatnot. I was reflecting not long ago. I went to a high school that produced any number of extremely successful people for 50 or 60 years. It was a parochial high school, a parish high school, but it produced lots of famous people. And I was remembering that the daily diet in that school was somebody told you how miserable you were as a failure, how dumb you were, how this could have been done better. If you were only a little smarter, if you'd done your homework better, you could have actually done something really spectacular. But if you didn't hit spectacular, you were a miserable disappointment. Now, if you think about that, if I tell that to my kids, they think, holy smokes, sounds like you went to a concentration camp. But the reality is, the schools I sent them to were highly competitive, and some kids got to Harvard, and some kids got to the community college, and it was largely thought to be the fault of the kids. They didn't work hard enough, they didn't achieve enough, and I think it's much more real-life experience. That's a real-life experience that people outside the United States live every day. And to the extent that we just bestow high levels of self-esteem and we don't let people earn it anymore, and we let the government basically protect people constantly with an expanding safety net, we have poor people, for example, that we deny. We deny the opportunity to earn human dignity and self-esteem by hard work.
Yeah, and this is so obvious. I don't know if you saw that movie, Meet the Fockers, but at one point, Robert De Niro's looking at Ben Stiller's room where he grew up, and he's got a bunch of ribbons on the wall for finishing 6th, 7th, and 8th place. And De Niro says to him, oh, your parents must be so proud of you. And, I want my kids to compete, but I want them to succeed, and I don't want them to be happy with not succeeding, that somehow it's a consolation prize to get that ribbon that says you showed up and you're a good sport, a sportsmanship award. I mean, that's not what it's about.
Well, that's not how life works, except inside the federal government. Where people are just promoted if they're bad workers, if they do bad things, they get raises. In the outside world, as I've remarked to many people, because I've been a chief executive for 25 years and had lots and lots of people work for me. When I do college lectures these days, I always make a point of saying that, of all the hundreds of people that work for me, I seldom knew where they went to college. And I think the reality is, inside corporate America, by the time you're 30, certainly 35, wherever you went to college has drifted away totally. You're being tested every day on what you can do, what you know, and how innovative you are. And that's all that counts. Yeah,
that is what it's about. You're so spot on. And
so nobody says at 40, well, we promoted you because you were 8th placed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For sure.
The only place it's different is the government.
Yeah, well, their mediocrity prevails. It's all about not ruffling feathers, kissing the right butt, and finding your career path. Exactly the opposite of being an entrepreneur, where it really often comes down to Darwinian dynamics, that it's the law of the jungle. And if you don't grow and you don't provide the service and the products that your customers want, you go out of business. And yet in the government, when you fail, you just get more money. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so your book, tell us a little bit about that. What you want.
The book was, we began the book in right after this great recession began. And the question was, how do we get out of this? But in the course of sort of outlining this discussion, I said to my co-author, Bob Layton, maybe what we really ought to do is talk about moving the target for American growth from 3%, where it's roughly been for 100 years. When we're lucky, we can hit 3%. I'm not sure we'll ever get to 3% again, by the way, but
Sure.
How would we move it to 4%, an audacious conversation? And it turns out that the only way you're going to really move growth is to induce more companies to come into being that will be big growth companies, very high-scale sales companies that sell lots and lots of stuff. They sell more than $1 billion a year. We need more of them. In fact, we began to estimate, first time in economic history, that if over the next 20 years we could produce maybe 15 new companies that every year hit $1 billion. In the United States, we do at least 30 a year when we're growing. We haven't been doing that very well lately. We could move gross national product or gross domestic product from what the target is, about 3%, to 4% or maybe 5%. And, if we did that, we'd solve the deficit problem. We'd have everybody back to work who wanted to work. We could essentially eliminate poverty. So the big, audacious goal is really a high-growth economy. And the only way you can get there, which is what the implication of the subtitle of the book is you have to renew the entrepreneurial spirit. In the United States, we need more entrepreneurs starting more businesses. So the book basically talks about how that happens and how we could make it happen. And I'm happy to say that one of the things that we were outlining in the book, we had to stop and undo one chapter, redo a chapter, is we suggested basically that there ought to be a jobs bill that emphasized the creation of new companies. Well, lo and behold, Congress really got to work on that. And it didn't come out exactly the way we had hoped, but there is a jobs bill, and there's more enthusiasm for entrepreneurship as a result.
Yeah, and up next, I want to talk about taxes and how to generate more entrepreneurs. We'll be back in one moment. All right, we are back. And Carl, did you happen to see the hearing yesterday? I should call it the witch hunt, where they're hauling up Tim Cook, the head of Apple, and saying, how dare you avoid paying taxes legally? We're disgusted. And then did you see Rand Paul's response to them?
I didn't. I saw the hearing. I didn't see Senator Paul's response.
Well, basically he said, you know what? We should be up here in front of a mirror because we created a tax code that's inherently unfair, that this is a great company, a great success story, and you're going after them for no reason. And he totally took the fangs out of the committee. And really, you look at taxation, and I felt for many years that corporations should not be taxed at all because the individuals pay the taxes. You and I pay them, not the corporation itself. So what is the point of corporate taxation? And then you get into the whole manifest unfairness of the tax code, thousands of pages. I mean, just the other day, Carl, they said that pretty much big companies have figured out that they don't have to provide full health insurance to their employees under the new Obamacare mandates. They can effectively just give them a little bit of doctor coverage, some
bare bones.
Bare bones, like nobody even writes that policy now, and then they don't get penalized, and everyone's happy. But small business, on the other hand, Carl, has to supply the whole plethora of medical benefits, whether you want them or not. And really, small business gets discriminated against by the U.S. government every day.
Well, it does. I think it's actually much worse at the moment. I write a lot. I was doing an essay this morning in which I'm basically objecting to the use by the State Department and now the federal government itself, Small Business Administration, of this phrase, small and medium enterprise. That's a phrase that's borrowed from the European Union, and it actually reflects the way economists in our government are now thinking about our economy, and it goes simply like this. There's small businesses. They're kind of cute. There's big business, and we're going to do everything possible to protect it because, quote-unquote, they make the jobs, which is patently absurd.
Proven false.
And then we'll have sort of these sort of middle-sized businesses. They even used the German word Mittelstand for it. Now, what it all reflects is what economists call as industrial policy. And that is, big business can get away with anything. Big business is very smart about how it lays out its political contributions, as we're beginning to find out. It's funny, you can call me a cynic. I actually happen to have been at Google headquarters just a week ago, Thursday coming up. So I was just there 4 or 5 days ago. And I was thinking about this, listening to those hearings. It's an American company. It's as American as apple pie. And if they paid the taxes that Senator Levin was, telling them they had to pay, I was just thinking of headquarters there. Headquarters at Cupertino may be, from best I can guess, maybe 10 huge office buildings. Well, okay, the outcome of paying those taxes might be closing up 4 of those buildings and laying off all those brilliant people who create one great product after another, but more importantly, grow our GDP at home. But what really causes me to wonder is, are we going to now take a look at General Electric? Or some of the other companies, that their CEOs populate the president's advisory councils and whatnot. What really did Apple do to come into the public spotlight? Bill Gates said once upon a time that he had grown his business hugely, and it was not until maybe 10 or 15 years ago that they even had an office for Microsoft in Washington. It was a miraculous thing. Here was
no
a
lobbyists.
company
Yeah.
that paid no attention to Washington whatsoever.
Till they paid
and then
attention
one day,
to
Washington
them.
said, pay attention to us, and they launched an antitrust suit. And, now Microsoft probably owns a whole building. I think I've seen their name on a big building in Washington. You have to come pay obeisance to the federal government.
Yeah, and you know what? They have never been the same company since. They've been in a pronounced tailspin since then. So, what I liked about Cook is he didn't apologize for it. He said, this is what we do. We paid $7 billion in taxes last year, or $6 billion last year. We will pay at least $7 billion this year. And basically Ron Paul said, if you want the money back here, you better stop being hostile to capital, because money goes where it's treated well, and it's not treated well in the United States any longer. And that is really, of all the policies being implemented in Washington, everything else, the attack on business and entrepreneurship, which are two different things. It's like you said, you have these big businesses. They're really you go to your local too big to fail bank. It's just a branch office of the federal government or the Treasury. They're one and the same. And arguably GE is just a branch office of the federal government. They were bailed out like the rest of them. And somehow it's in the psyche of the American public that business entrepreneurship is a less than worthy pursuit, and you're greedy and you only care about yourself and not others. And really, you and I know, Carl, that nothing could be further from the truth.
I know, but, we have a problem here. When I think it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago at Arizona State, for the graduation speech, the President of the United States basically said, those of you who will go to work in government will be, the more honored, the more valuable, and the more virtuous, roughly, I'm not using words, but graduates. Now, 90% of the kids in that audience, if they're like every other university, are going to work in business. And, God's given everybody their own creative talent, and most of those kids will apply their creative talent in business. And the president is no different from what the message at many universities is. That kids who choose public service have done something really wonderful. Princeton, they'll relieve your student loans if you graduate and go to work for the federal government and the state government. But God help us if we don't have those wonderfully creative people who go to work in the private sector, because they do something that's lost on most people in government, public policy schools, certainly these days in history departments, and tragically even in economics departments. Those people don't go to work in businesses, and businesses don't make money and pay taxes. The entire government itself has to shut down, shrink up, or tragically, what we do now is just borrow money from China to keep going.
Yeah, it's really quite distressing to see that. And yeah, if one of my kids went and told me, "Hey, I'm getting a job with the IRS or the FDA," I'd want to disown them. I would be embarrassed by it, and yet somehow it's a badge of honor to this group of this administration, and really the opposite should be the case. I mean, I hate to sound like Ayn Rand, but she really nailed it. And personal initiative, individual effort, that's what needs to be rewarded, not being part of the collective and being a faceless, nameless bureaucrat inhabiting a cubbyhole. It just wasn't how the country was built.
You know, if people who chose to do that could just go we could put them in cubbyholes and they became nameless and faceless and harmless, it would be great. The problem is,
yes.
The reason they go do that is they want to lord it over other people. They want to say no with the power of the government to virtually anything. Virtually anything. And this is a real issue.
Yes. Yeah, it's really damaging to the country, the economy, for all of the rules and the regulations of the federal government. I mean, go back to Sarbanes-Oxley, which really stopped small businesses from ever going public, which used to be kind of the American dream. You'd start a small business, take it public, and get the public involved, and you'd really excel. And
well,
now,
Dodd-Frank was the build on Sarbanes-Oxley, and the net effect of it all is that the finance industry, it used to be when you wanted to take a company public, you came to our stock exchange, and that's not going to be the future anymore.
Nope.
And it's not that somebody else wrested it away from us. It's not that Shanghai or Singapore or London was more skilled at it. It's that our Senate, for the most part, our Congress, at the urging of presidents, basically shot ourselves in the foot financially. We will not be the home of financial markets. Now, there are a lot of people say, well, that's great because all the greedy businessmen and so forth. Well, it's terrific. But you watch where New York City is in 10 years. When Wall Street has moved itself, because the New York Stock Exchange is no longer owned and operated out of New York City, it will have its implications.
Oh, yeah. Well, the New York Stock Exchange really doesn't exist anymore. It's a portal on a website, and basically the stock exchange down there at Broad and Wall is a Hollywood movie set. So when you need footage of a bunch of traders yelling and, the wheels of commerce grinding, you take that film clip, but really it's over less than, I think their employment's down by 2/3 on the floor, or 3/4. That's all a thing of the past. All trading takes place on a desktop. Carl, I want to thank you again for coming on.
Well, they are doing some very important things at the New York Stock Exchange. They do play a very critical role in the economy. So you just can't dismiss them like that. What I'm saying is that the whole structure of trading in the United States is what's under assault. And that's the federal government trying to essentially close it down.
Yep. It's just a case of Atlas shrugged. And, I just mean that basically Wall Street's become automated to the point where there's no back offices in downtown anymore. When I went to school down there, every one of those little streets like Pine and all these streets, Water Street, were all back offices for Wall Street. They moved the back offices out, then they automated them out. They don't exist anymore. So the whole nature of Wall Street has changed. But in any event, Carl, again, where do we find your book? Where's your website?
Well, the book is for sale, obviously, on Amazon, Better Capitalism. The website is Carl Schramm. And the book is called Better Capitalism, published by Yale in 2012.
Excellent. And you're doing great work here. I mean, the more that we refocus on the basics of what made the United States the greatest country ever known to man, perhaps we can get back a portion of that glory. Thanks so much, Carl. It's been great speaking with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This show was brought to you by Audible. When it comes to audiobooks, there's only one place to go. That's audiblepodcast.com/Lutz, audiblepodcast.com/LUTZ. Sign up today, get a free 1-month membership and a free audiobook. And send us an email. Let us know how you like that book.